Imagine waking up every morning in a narrow, cold prison cell. You're rarely allowed to leave this room. Every day looks exactly the same, but you're not just locked up. You're waiting for something far worse. You know that one day you will be executed. You just don't know when. Days, months, even years pass. And every night you go to sleep with the unbearable thought that tomorrow could be your last. What sounds like a terrifying nightmare is the harsh reality for nearly 100 death row inmates in Japan. And yet, Japan is widely regarded as one of the safest countries in the world, known especially for its high quality of life. Still, alongside the United States, Japan remains the only developed country that continues to carry out executions. And it does so in an extremely disturbing way. So, what exactly makes Japan's death penalty so cruel? To understand that, we need to go back to the very beginning, to the question, how does Japan treat someone who commits a crime? Japan's harsh justice system doesn't just reveal itself in prison, it begins immediately after someone is accused. In most Western countries, suspects are given a lawyer, have the right to remain silent, and go through a fair legal process in court. In Japan, things are different. The country uses a system called Daio Kangoku. Under this system, you are not presumed innocent until proven guilty. Instead, you're treated as guilty from the start and pressured into confessing by any means necessary. In practice, this means you're placed in police custody, where a brutal interrogation phase begins, so severe that even human rights organizations have warned about it. While in countries like Germany or the US, suspects are only held briefly, Japanese suspects can be interrogated by police for up to 23 consecutive days, and the way they're treated is often inhumane. They are not allowed a lawyer during questioning, nor can they refuse to speak. On top of that, they're subjected to psychological torment, sometimes deprived of sleep, isolated from family and friends, and mentally broken to the point where they can no longer clearly present their side of the story. There are even reports of suspects being forced to confess, often just to escape the unbearable situation. Once they've confessed, they go to trial, and from that moment, they have virtually no chance of avoiding punishment. Japan has a conviction rate of 99%. That means nearly everyone is found guilty, and in the worst cases, sentenced to death. This happens because cases are rushed through the courts, and it's much easier to rely on a confession than to conduct a full investigation. Even worse, retrials are incredibly rare. So if someone ends up on death row wrongfully, they have almost no chance of ever getting out. Even minors aren't spared. A few years ago, 19-year-old Teruhiko Seki was sentenced to death for murder, even though at the time 19 was still considered a minor in Japan. But what makes Japan's death penalty truly brutal isn't just the way people are convicted, it's what happens afterward. Because what goes on behind the closed doors of Japan's prisons is shocking. Death row inmates are never told when they will be executed. Decades often pass between sentencing and execution, with prisoners forced to expect their death at any moment. Japan's oldest death row inmate is already 85 years old and still waiting for his sentence to be carried out. In most cases, inmates only find out on the very morning of their execution that they will die that day. So what exactly is life like on Japan's death row? The cell that becomes your permanent home is so bare that you can do nothing but sleep in it. A thin mat serves as your bed, and a single hook on the wall is where you hang your clothes. If you're lucky, you may be allowed a few very limited personal belongings. In winter, you freeze, there's no heating. In summer, the heat becomes unbearable. There's no air conditioning either. All furniture has rounded edges to eliminate any chance of suicide. Most inmates develop severe mental illness after a few years on death row, but there's no way out. One striking example of this psychological damage is Iwao Hakamada. Now 89, he spent half his life on death row after being sentenced to death in 1968 for allegedly killing 3 members of his family. Years later, it was revealed he was innocent. He was eventually acquitted after 48 years on death row, something that is almost unheard of in Japan. He became the longest-serving death row inmate in Japanese history. But even though Iwao is free now, he is no longer the same person. A psychologist diagnosed him with a mental disability caused by his years in solitary confinement. He no longer speaks, Not even now that he's free. The state paid him around 1.5 million euros in compensation, but he hardly uses the money. Instead, he spends his time walking through the city for hours every day, simply enjoying the freedom he was once denied. The time leading up to execution feels endless, because inmates live in total isolation. They are held in solitary confinement with no contact with other prisoners. They spend nearly 24 hours a day alone, not allowed to speak to anyone unless spoken to first. They can't even talk to prison guards unless permitted. Visits from family or friends are extremely rare. All day long, the inmate sits on the floor of the cell, alone in silence. There is no TV, no radio. You're not allowed to move freely or engage in any of the hobbies you once enjoyed. Your daily routine is completely controlled by the prison. Every morning, you're woken by guards shouting and loud classical music. After that, your only task is to sit still and remain silent. Unlike regular inmates, death row prisoners aren't even allowed to work. You rarely get fresh air. Only twice a week for 30 minutes can you go outside for exercise in a fenced-off yard. That's your only glimpse of the outside world. There's no privacy either. Even when you lie in bed, someone is watching through cameras or peepholes in the door, even at night. Given these conditions, some death row inmates might even begin to long for execution. But even their final day is full of psychological torment, even before the act itself. Often, prisoners are informed just hours before that they'll be executed that day. Shortly after receiving this news, they are handed white clothing. In Japanese culture, white symbolizes death. Wearing this outfit, the inmate is escorted to the room where they'll spend their final moments. They're allowed to write a short farewell letter and eat a small final meal. But unlike in the US, this is not a last meal of their choosing. The inmate must pick something from the standard prison menu. A guard then reads out the official execution order and the prisoner is taken to the execution chamber. The room is sterile, like an operating room. No windows, no natural light. A blue curtain is the last thing the inmate sees before being blindfolded. They are then led behind the curtain, where one thing stands out, a red square on the floor. That's where the prisoner is placed. It marks the trapdoor. This is where the gallows await, because in Japan, execution is carried out by hanging. With hands bound, a 3-centimeter thick rope is placed around the inmate's neck. In an adjacent room, 3 officers each press one of 3 buttons. Only one button activates the trapdoor, so none of them knows who triggered the mechanism. The floor gives way, and the inmate falls, breaking their neck. Did you expect Japan's death penalty to be this cruel? Let us know your thoughts in the comments and leave a like if you found this video interesting. Bye, and see you next time.